Episode 149. You live 78 years.
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
The very best podcast in the world. Welcome to episode 149. You live 78 years. Now, I hope that a lot of you were busy learning by asking, since yesterday's episode. And there were, some positive remarks that came along unsuspiciously. And, it was like interesting feedback to get that, a lot of people said, I'm not, really afraid to ask. But, ever since I started really asking, things started to get much better for me. And so that was, kind of rewarding to get that kind of feedback that I was kind of in the off, that, the example that I stated was an isolated case. Well, no, not exactly. But the consequences or the association with the consequence was rather unique. So, therefore, way to go. The Daily Bugger, if you find this episode or any other of the 148 preceding episodes interesting, make sure to subscribe to the podcast in any case, because there could come an episode that is not necessarily interesting for you alone, but maybe interesting for someone in your sphere of influence. And sharing is caring. That's kind of like the baseline of what I'm trying to convey here every day by bugging you, is to share, the episode. Maybe somebody comes into your mind that, friend or family that could need help with, for instance, defeating procrastination, where we had a very successful three-part episode on how to break the cycle of procrastination. So in the mindset of sharing is caring, share these episodes as far and wide as you can. If you feel uncomfortable sharing them to the broader public through social media, you can send single individual episodes to single individual people, or individual people in a relationship. They don't need to be single. Sorry, stupid word joke. Anywho, long story short, today's episode is about a very rough and similarly, stupid estimation I made very quickly, in that I determined that, at least in the Western world, your average life expectancy is 78 years overall. And I went ahead and fished out a bunch of statistic BS that I came across, and cross-referenced that to other statistic fuckery that I came across, only to create my own statistical nonsense to bring the point across that, for instance, you spend 28.8 years of these finite 78 years of your life average expectancy sleeping, right? That's a bummer. But what is this episode about, right? That's number one. I'm going to kind of tear down several interesting things that I found with a conclusion that's going to blow your mind. And there we go in that. There was another very important point I tried to make. Yes. So with all the wealth that you accumulate in one life, and most of you are going to spend it on stupid shit. That's okay. That's your decision. And only I determined that to be stupid shit. So, that's me. That's the beauty about opinions. They're like assholes. Everybody's got one. And never mind mine, right? I am quite isolated and have made very, very, very stupid decisions in my life. Trust me, lots of them. I'm an entrepreneur. That kind of entitles me to. No, but seriously, time, I think, is the only luxury, the only finite resource that we have in a lifetime. And none of the theories that any religious organization or anything that there's going to be an afterlife or a second life or whatever, I'm not too convinced yet. And I've been through it. I talked in one episode and how I even ended up with the Freemasons, and said, okay, look, I've tried all the religions. They're not for me. Are you guys? And they're like, well, you have to believe in something. And I'm like, yeah, but, and they were like, no, you have to believe in something. And I was like, okay, yeah, it was nice meeting you. Anyhow, long story short, it's important, insanely important in this episode that the one lesson you walk away with is that time is finite. Your life ends with death, sooner or hopefully later. But that's just the law of nature. So in that sense, I wanted to convey why and how much time we spend on different activities in these 78 years. So I already took away what's called, I spoilered that you spend 28.8 years on average sleeping. Years in this sense is 24 hours, like 24 hours added to weeks, added to months, added to years. And so, it's not like it's difficult to grasp, but just to clarify. So the next runner-up is that you spend only 10.5 years working. Now, to put that into context, why is that only 10.5 years while we sleep 28.8? Well, yeah, you go to school, you go to university. If you're lucky, you have you can reap the benefits of all of that, pension money that you paid to other people. And there we go. That's kind of like why you only in quotation marks spend 10.5 years working. Now, the next runner-up is 9 years of television, video games, social networking, and that kind of stuff. Which is interesting, right? Because, sitting in front of television, it's kind of like an antiquated concept, but a lot of people still do it because their parents did, right? There are things like Netflix and stuff, and I didn't really check the stats whether that counts. But television, honestly, folks, you watch a movie and you have like a gazillion advertisement interruptions. No. No, I'd rather pay my, what is it now, 17 or 18 bucks a month to have uninterrupted television when I want it. And don't have to make myself a slave to the programming director of a television station. Now my show is on. And no, TiVo doesn't count and crap like that because you're still going to have the advertisements. So anyhow, long story short, that's some kind of like, where you're like, okay, I invest 9 years of my life into TV, video games, and social networking, and it's getting worse because not only the television stations, these antiquated dinosaurs, but particularly video games and social networking platforms try to increase that number drastically. And here's the catch, because they have to sell you advertising to be profitable. You ever think of that? You ever think why your Facebook stream is full of stuff that's interesting to you, presumably, and it gets better and better and better? Try to fuck it up. I did so by accident because my better half looked for shoes, for women's shoes on my phone. And for the youngest day, until the youngest day probably, I will get advertisements for women's shoes. And, then you start to search for stuff that's not necessarily in your prime area of interest. And you'll see that the algorithm then just gives up on you and says, okay, there you go. Take what you want. I even, managed to actually get Facebook to not show me advertisements on videos for, I think it was about 7 or 8 months until they started adding those again, those bastards. But anyhow, what else? That's the same applies for TV. The same applies for TV 2.0. For, anything series wise that you can binge, they'll make fucking sure that it's interesting and captivating. And that's the thing where I fell victim to when on a project in, I think it was 2014, somebody on the project said, you have to watch Breaking Bad. It's totally interesting. And I was like, do I? Really? Seriously? And I flew home on a Thursday night, and Friday morning I turned on Breaking Bad, and Sunday evening I had sore eyes from watching it because it got me totally hooked. I didn't get jack shit done on the weekend. But I binged Breaking Bad for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And it was a totally cool experience. Don't get me wrong. But on the other hand, what could I have done with those? I don't know how many hours I wasted. I don't want to know. So it's like, could these hours have been invested better? Maybe. Right. And so in that sense, it's like, what do you prioritize for yourself? If you need television or, get something out of it, you chillax while you do so, or you do other shit while you're watching, or I don't know, whatever it is, it's something to be aware of. That's just the point that I'm trying to make here. Now, 3 years less, so 6 years is doing chores, right? And chores includes pretty much anything from, doing the garden if you have one, to doing the laundry or doing the dishes or vacuuming or whatever. And pretty much on any one of these fucking activities, I will be listening to a podcast. It will be a very selective news program, either, or, an entertainment show, like Rogan or, whatever, at the end of the day. But interesting things really start to develop there, because all of a sudden you're entertaining your mind while you're doing monotonous, repetitive shit. And this monotonous, repetitive shit becomes really interesting, and because it just kind of flies, because you're tricking your subconscious, which is, taken over because you've done it a zillion times. But you trick your subconscious into thinking, God damn it, that went fast. So it's a positive influence, really. So next one is 4 years of food. And that includes, obviously you don't spend 4 years eating, but this includes meal preparation, for instance, and buying groceries and shit like that. And that's, pretty steep, but considering that what you put into your body, kind of gives you a result in form of energy and, concentration, focus, health, those 4 years are pretty well invested. And no, I don't listen to podcasts usually when I prepare a meal, because I want to be there. I want to enjoy what I'm doing with all my senses. I want to, smell the produce. I want to look at it. I want to get the haptic experience of, what I'm doing. Cutting myself in the finger, for instance, crap like that. That's really interesting and shouldn't be really underrated. Now, 3.5 years of education. I think that's a no-brainer. I know a lot of you are going to be like, yeah, but I spent 12 years in school. No, you didn't. You spend time sleeping, you spend time partying, you spend time watching TV, you spend time doing stupid pranks. So that's where these 24 hours kind of add up and make it like an average of 3.5 years of education, like 24-hour cycle wise. 2.5 years of grooming. That's an average where I think the ladies are going to be ahead of us, guys. Seriously. Then 2.5 years of shopping. I think that one goes to the ladies as well. 1.5 years of childcare. And this is interesting. It's like, I spent 18 years raising you. Yeah, but you slept. You know, not much, but you slept, and you worked, and you prepped food, and there were good times in this child care raising thing. 1.3 years of commuting. That's really an interesting thing, and I think a lot of us, with jobs being further away, etc., are kind of breaking that barrier of 1.3 years. But at the end of the day, you can use your commute very, 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 very effectively. And if you're good at bullshitting, you can even convince your employer that that's work time. I have a friend in France who spends 2 hours a day on a train from work one way, and he uses that to work. Now, this train in France obviously has had internet for a while, or otherwise he was using his 3G, 4G, LTE, whatever, to communicate, to do conference calls, to chug away on his email, and so on and so forth. And he actually convinced his employer, a Fortune 500 company, that is work time, and they bought it. So interesting thing. Discuss it with your employer. Don't come running to me if they, kind of start whipping you or something. However, and this is the conclusion, and the thing that really blows your fucking mind, is that you only have 9 years left. And the question for you as a takeaway is, how are you going to spend them? Because, at the end of the day, your day is over and it's done for. And you can take certain amounts of hours, a certain amount of hours away from, any of the aforementioned positions. But still, you have 9 years left. So if my math is correct, I sucked at math, do it for me. should add up a little. So anyhow, I mentioned in the financial freedom exercise, I think it was episode 40, I went into detail and kind of subdivided the day into thirds and said, okay, 1/3 is sleeping and rest, 1/3 is working, and the other third is what you normally would spend playing video games, watching TV, or doing other rather useless things that don't get you wealthy. And if you reinvest those 8 hours of quote unquote free time into a side hustle, for instance, or whatever, then you could actually get out of the 9-to-5 hamster wheel. And a lot of people took that. I think it's actually one of the most successful episodes that I've ever produced. But the same applies here. If you take these 9 years of TV and video games, social networking, all of that crap, and use that to make money, add that up to the other 9 years that you had left, that's 18 years of 78 that actually is available to reposition yourself in life. So on that note, and closing this episode, the core question is, how will you spend those 9 years? Or if you can kind of, live without television and all of that other crap, that's 18 years. How are you going to use them? Right? And that's something to think about. In that sense, I hope everybody has a successful day. If you are east of me far enough, I hope you have had a successful day, and wish you a good night. And we'll be in touch tomorrow. And I hope that I will see you again then. Take care, stay safe, and peace out.